Hey everybody, KC here. So I saw a story in the Atlantic the other day that the headline just immediately grabbed my attention. Touch screens are ruining cars. And the writer, somebody named Thomas Chatterton Williams, basically was talking about the impact that technology has had on the act of driving. He talked about the fact that his daughter, who's 10 years old, recently rode in a Tesla for the first time. And he said, well, how was it? And she responded, kind of cool, because it was kind of like my iPad. She understood, he writes, that the Tesla is basically a computer full of distracting and gratuitous applications, and it just happened to perform some locomotive functions. He writes how everything has gone through some sort of iPadization, if you will. Vacuums and toasters and trash cans, they all have apps that link to your iPhone or your smartphone. Finding the analog versions of every product can take effort, and nowhere has this become truer than in the automotive realm. He writes that this is not an issue specific to electric vehicles. Virtually all modern cars are now just slick screens connected to giant mobile computing systems that operate with a complexity and often a fragility that none of us can handle independently. And listen, let's be clear. It's not like I love to get under the hood and see what's going on with my engine. I don't even know how to change the oil in my car. But that said, as most of you know, I drive a 10-year-old Mustang convertible with a manual transmission. And the one thing I do love to do, I love to turn the key and hear the sound. In some ways, it's like, opening a wine bottle by pulling out the cork as opposed to unscrewing it. There's a romance that comes with that sound. There's a romance that comes with that action that, somehow can't be replaced. One of the things that he writes is electric vehicles are simply at the forefront of the soul-crushing tendency to reduce everything that was once seductively human and endearingly, sometimes transcendentally imperfect and unique, to the impersonal, tech-saturated level of pretty nice. And that's a really interesting question. Are there times when technology, as opposed to raising us to a higher common denominator, are they reducing us to a lower common denominator? Where maybe they touch our minds, but they don't necessarily allow whatever that thing is, whether it's a car or a store, to touch our souls, to touch our hearts in a different kind of way. Like I said, I drive this 10-year-old convertible, and I was reading another story the other day about how convertibles are going away. In part, that's because electric vehicles, apparently they can't make them as convertibles because they require a level of being aerodynamic that, a convertible kind of wrecks. In 2014, convertibles were 0.9% of the market, not very much, less than 1%. But in 2023, they were down to 0.6% of the marketplace. There were only 70,000 convertibles sold in the U.S. In 2020, and they think that's even going to go down even more. There was part of the story was talking about the kinds of convertibles that were available in the marketplace and how many they sold between 2001 and 2023. And like the Mustang in 2001 sold more than 36,000 convertibles. In 2023, that was down to barely 4,600 convertibles. And listen, there were a bunch of convertibles available in 2001 that aren't available anymore, like the Chrysler Sebring convertible, the Mitsubishi Eclipse convertible, the Volkswagen Cabrio convertible, and the Lexus S430 convertible. They've all been discontinued. Other than the Mustang, you've got the Mazda Miata. I had two Miatas, and I love them. The Chevrolet Corvette and the Mercedes-Benz. Other than that, there are no convertibles. Although I think you can still find a BMW convertible. That happens not to be listed in this particular chart. And the other thing, manual transmission sales, that's down to 2.4% of all cars sold. Now listen, I'm not saying that everybody should go back to driving manual transmission convertibles. I'm hardly suggesting that. But I do think that there's something being lost here. And I think there's a business lesson here for stores. Yes, they focus on technology. Yes, they focus on efficiency. But to a lesser extent, they focus on being effective. And part of being effective, especially in the food business, is identifying romance in food. It's not exactly the same thing as turning the key in a car, but there's something to be said for finding the romance, and I think that's what more retailers have to do. It's finding the aromas, finding the taste, finding ways to touch people's hearts and souls, not just their minds. Anyway, that's what's on my mind this morning, and as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.